Good evening on this Wednesday, September 28th. This is your 28storms.com tropical weather update. Tropical storm Ophelia now has maximum sustained winds of 50 miles per hour. It's forecast to become a hurricane by 2 p.m. on Friday. It's currently moving off toward the north-northwest at 7 miles per hour, and Bermuda is along that western fringe of the cone of error, so interest there. Should still keep an eye on the system, although at the moment it looks like the inner core is going to remain just to the east. This idea is being favored by the majority of the available model guidance. This is the island of Bermuda right here, and as you can see, many of the models are in agreement with the official forecast track, and they take the storm just to the east of Bermuda. And if that wasn't enough, this is the latest forecast for Tropical Storm Philippe. They maintain Philippe as a tropical storm throughout the next few days into 2 p.m. Saturday, but as it turns more toward the west, it should diminish to a tropical depression, and eventually it will make a turn back toward the northeast. Exactly when that occurs remains to be seen, but it should be to the east of Bermuda, despite some of the latest model trends that are a little bit closer than what they were indicating on yesterday. This is a quick view of the spaghetti model plots for Tropical Storm Philippe, and I really think that some of these more westerly tracks in the extended range are highly overdone. It should continue moving west-northwest for at least the next 3 days, and possibly even to the next 5 to 6 days, but eventually we will begin to see that turn toward the northeast. This evening's basin-wide satellite view shows that much of the Gulf and Caribbean are quiet. We only have our two tropical storms in the Atlantic we're talking about, and Tropical Storm Ophelia is still struggling due to westerly shear and some dry air to the west. We see that the convection is still restricted to the east of the surface circulation, and if we turn on the water vapor, we can still make out a very weak mid to upper level low located just to the north of the storm, and this low is forecast to distance itself from Tropical Storm Ophelia as it begins to move a little bit faster toward the northeast. Therefore, the westerly winds and the dry air entrainment further toward the south here should begin to relax a little bit, and that is the reason why the Hurricane Center now believes that Ophelia has a 50-50 chance of becoming a minimal Category 1 hurricane, and that forecast appears to be on target. In the meantime, we can also see that Tropical Storm Philippe is also suffering due to a lot of southwest wind shear. We see that we have an upper level low located just to the west of the storm, and it's rather unlikely that conditions are going to become any more favorable for Tropical Storm Philippe over the next 5 days, and so therefore it should eventually begin to weaken, although even if it maintains itself, it is likely to recurve to the east of Bermuda. Switching over to the eastern Pacific, Hurricane Hilary is on its last leg. We see that the storm is now beginning to weaken rather significantly, especially on the latest infrared. We're no longer seeing significant bursts of convection, and that is because it's moving into a more stable layer over cooler water temperatures, and we can also make out on the water vapor that it's being surrounded by quite a lot of dry air, and it is very likely that Hilary will be fully dissipated within the next 48 to 72 hours. So it's no threat to the Baja Peninsula, and if we turn our attention more toward the area to the south of Mexico, we see that there are no signs of any other disturbances developing in the eastern Pacific, so we're looking pretty good out there this evening. Looking ahead, starting off with the 12Z run of the CMC model, we see that much of the eastern Pacific is forecast to be quiet, although it is developing that one tropical cyclone to the south of Mexico. That is the only model showing any development south of the Mexican coastline anytime soon, and it's also the only model that is showing Tropical Storm Ophelia gaining enough longitude initially before turning straight into Bermuda, so that is also a solution that is being discounted at this time, and the remainder of the Atlantic Basin, including the Gulf and Caribbean, are forecast to be quiet for the next 6 days. Turning to the 12Z GFS, much like the CMC, much of the eastern Pacific is forecast to be relatively quiet for the next 5 to 6 days. It looks like around by day 7 we could see the intertropical conversion zone become a little bit more active here. That's a distinct possibility if the Madden-Julian oscillation becomes a little bit more favorable in the extended range. The MJO is very difficult to forecast. We're going to go ahead and wait for a little bit more model consistency before we begin to hype up the possibility that we could begin to see a return of convection across the eastern Pacific and western half of the Atlantic Basin. Now, back to the GFS though, We see that by day 7 it's also taking Tropical Storm Philippe much more toward the west, and it maintains the system as a tropical storm. However, that is a scenario that appears to be somewhat unlikely due to the enormous amount of troughing that is forecast to be present over much of the central and western Atlantic throughout the forecast period. If we switch over to the 12Z run of the ECMWF model, by 24, 48, and especially 72 hours, we see this long wave trough beginning to push into the western Atlantic, and this is forecasting Tropical Storm Ophelia to begin moving a little bit more toward the north-northeast, and that should take the storm just to the east of Bermuda. And also notice by 96 hours, Tropical Storm Philippe has weakened rather significantly, and I see no reason why Philippe would continue moving westward when we have a potential hurricane sitting just to the northeast of Bermuda with a long wave trough over much of the mid-Atlantic and northeast. So both of our systems should recurve without being much of a problem. But one notable exception is the province of Newfoundland. There is a chance that the remnants of Ophelia, as it becomes extratropical, could spiral more toward the north, directly into you. And even if this were to begin transitioning into an extratropical system, you could still get hurricane force winds from Ophelia. So interest in Bermuda and especially Newfoundland should be keeping a close watch on the tropics as we go into the remainder of the week. But elsewhere, we are looking very good in the tropics. It doesn't look like we're going to have any additional named systems over the next 5 days, and it looks like we will be starting off the month of October relatively calm, but that's not to say that we can't get a couple more systems, especially as we go into the middle part of the month. We'll just have to wait and see. But thanks again for visiting 28storms.com, and don't forget to check us out tomorrow afternoon for another video update.